नमस्कार. आयच्या या खाशेल्या मुलाखतीत तुमकां सगळ्यांक माय मोगाचो येवकार. इशानो ट्रान्सजेंडर पर्सन्स प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ रायट्स अमेंडमेंट बिल 2026 लोकसभेत पास जाला, राज्यसभेत पास जाला आणि आता प्रेसिडेंटाच्या एक्सेंटाची ते वाट पळयता. या बिला भोवतणी खूप चर्चा जाली, खूप डिस्कशन जालें आणि ज्यांच्या खातीर हे बिल हाडटात किंवा हो अमेंडमेंट हाडटात अशे ट्रान्स कम्युनिटीचे जे लोक आसात तांणी ते अमेंडमेंट अपोज केल्यात आणि गोंयभरान म्हणया किंवा भारतभरान ताचे अपोज कितलीशींच निदर्शनां, कितलेशेच प्रोग्राम्स, कार्यावळी ते ऑर्गनायज करत आसात. अजुनूय दे आर होपफूल की हे अमेंडमेंट पास जावचें ना, हो कायदो जसो आसा तसो चालीक लागतलो. पूण हे सगळें जाता आसतना ह्या विशया भोवतणी जो गैरसमज आसा, जी मिसकन्सेप्शन्स आसा, मिसअंडरस्टँडिंग्स आसात, ती कमी जावपाच्या वाटेची वाडत आसात आणि म्हणून आमकां दिसलें की ह्या विशयाची एकदां जाण करून घेवची. ह्या विशया संबंधान जे गैरसमज आसात ते ना करून घेवपा खातीर एक पावल मुखार मारचें आणि म्हणून हो जे हे डिस्कशन आसा, ही मुलाखत आसा ती आमी हांगा घडोवन हाडटात आणि ही मुलाखत आमी घेतात. ते आमच्या बरोबर आसात ट्रान्स एक्टिविस्ट आरुवी. Aruvi, welcome to the interview. Aruvi is a PhD scholar in Goa University and also she is actively part of Goa Queer and Trans Collective. She's a trans woman and I want to start by asking you the same thing that if for me it is easy to say that I am Anvesha. I don't have to tell someone that I am a male or a female. But when we introduce you or when your identity comes into question, we have to start by asking or saying that you are a trans woman. Aruvi, what is this entire amendment about and why are you opposing the amendment?
First off, thank you so much, Anvesha, and thank you to the Voice for Goem, because since the beginning, you guys have been there in the press meet and you guys covered the protest, and post the protest, you guys had published a commentary, and now you are doing this special interview. This means a lot for us in the community because by the looks of it, this is going to be a very long fight and it's going to get very lonely for us. And
True.
so we need cross-movement solidarities. We need solidarities from all allies, and you have been expressly stating that you stand with us, and that means so much for us. And so on behalf of the community, first, before I start, I would like to say thank you to
Most welcome.
So the ridiculousness of the thing, because everywhere I'm being introduced, it's saying that Aruvi is a woman will not do. And when somebody is introducing a woman, you don't have to even say.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
You will be a writer or a poet.
True.
But Aruvi will be a trans woman writer. And now even that identity is coming under question. Because now I don't know if I can any longer call myself a trans woman. Right? So what is this amendment bill about? So on the 13th of March, the Union Minister for Social Justice and Empowerment, Dr. Virendra Kumar, introduced the bill known as the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Amendment Bill 2026 in the Lok Sabha.
Right.
So following that, within a span of 12 days, the ruling party has managed to bulldoze the bill. On 24th, the bill got passed in the Lok Sabha. On the very next day, 25th, the bill got passed in the Rajya Sabha, and now it is waiting the president's assent. The point to note is that there were several oppositions to the bill by many of the opposition parties, including Indian National Congress, the Samajwadi Party, and I would also like to plug in a thanks to our South Goa MP Captain Viriato Fernandez, because he put a tweet out on 24th March calling the bill an ill-conceived bill, and he said it undermines the dignity, autonomy, and constitutional protection guaranteed to transgender persons. And despite heavy opposition in both the houses, we know how the voice votes work with the majority. So somehow it got passed. And So why are we opposing the bill? So what is the amendment to?
Yeah.
The proposed amendment is an amendment to an existing act called the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act, which was passed in 2019.
Right.
So this was also passed after a decade of legal
True.
battle,
True.
and we could say that the germs for this act can be traced back more or less to the famous Nalsa
Nalsa
judgment
judgment.
of 2014.
Right.
So, so this right, which follows from the Nalsa judgment. If I can just quote
Sure,
one
please.
or two things from the Nalsa judgment. This is
Yeah.
from page 84. Article 21, as already indicated, protects one's right of self-determination of the gender to which a person belongs. Determination of gender to which a person belongs is to be decided by the person concerned. In other words, gender identity is integral to the dignity of an individual. And the Supreme Court goes on to say, goes on to declare that transgender persons' right to decide their self-identified gender is also upheld, and the center and state governments are directed to grant legal recognition of their gender identity, such as male, female, or as third gender.
Yeah.
So I could quote the whole Nalsa judgment, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the stress is very much on the right to self-determination, and also the Supreme Court is citing the fundamental rights guaranteed to every citizen of this country under Article 14, Article 19 1A, and Article 21.
Right.
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 So what the bill does is, as you already mentioned, many legal experts have read the bill clause by clause to say
Yeah.
why it makes no sense at all.
True.
Right? Why it is unconstitutional, why it is undemocratic. Just to make that point very clear, under the provisions of the existing Transgender Persons 2019 Protections Act, Section 17 of the Act mandates the constitution of a National Council for Transgender Persons.
Right.
And it clearly says there has to be representatives from across the country,
Sure.
and any decision, any legislative policy has to be consulted. Right?
Right.
So there is a whole council for that.
But has the consultation happened here?
Not at all. That's the question.
Right.
So this
Right.
is the democratic process.
True.
Because you can, we think we are living in a participatory democracy,
Right.
meaning the stakeholders of any law should be consulted in things that are
Absolutely.
going to affect them.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
But no consultation was done, and it is evident from the fact that after 25th, when the Rajya Sabha also passed the amendment bill,
Yeah.
two of the National Council members, two representatives, have sent their resignation,
Resignations. Right.
stating that we were not consulted.
Right.
So it already highlights the that no democratic process was
been
followed,
followed. Right.
and they also stressed the unconstitutional nature of the bill. So it is already very
Yeah.
clear.
Right.
To drive home the point even further, we need not look anywhere beyond the intent of the bill. So the intent of the bill is intent of the amendment bill is very clearly stated from the statement of objects and reasons. So the original 2019 Act. So what was the original Act? It was an act which meant to ensure that all transgender persons are given their fundamental right. They are not discriminated anywhere.
Right.
They are not left out of public participation in the government, because they are also citizens
Right.
who are constitutionally promised and guaranteed the rights.
True.
Right? So this was the intent. And I'm reading from the 2019 Act. It says, an act to provide for protection of rights of transgender persons and their welfare, and for matters connected therewith and incidental thereto. Right? So the statement of objects in the 2019 Act was this. So they begin by saying transgender community is one of the most marginalized communities in the country because they do not fit into the general categories of gender of male or female. Consequently, they face problems ranging from social exclusion to discrimination, lack of education facilities, unemployment, lack of medical facilities, and so on. And here the intent is clear because they are citing that though Article 14 of the Constitution guarantees to all persons equality before law, Clauses 1 and 2 of Article 15 and Clause 2 of Article 16 prohibit in express terms discrimination on the ground of sex, and Clause 1A of Article 19 ensures freedom of speech and expression to all citizens. Despite all this, the discrimination and atrocities against transgender persons still continues, right? And this they are citing in accordance with the Nalsa judgment.
Right.
And one of the rights which was expressly guaranteed was the right to self-determination.
Self-determination.
And now if we just move to the intent of the amendment bill,
Yeah.
if you permit, I'll read
Yeah,
just
of course.
just
Yeah,
two
yeah.
of the statements. It starts by saying it is the legislative policy to recognize a specific class of transgender persons who face social issues and to create a regime for their protection. The legislative policy was and is intended to protect only those who face severe social exclusion due to biological reasons for no fault of their own and no choice of their own. And point number 3, the intent, object, and purpose of the Act is and was to protect a specified class of persons, socially and culturally known as transgender people, who face societal discrimination of an extreme and oppressive nature. The purpose was and is to not protect at every class of persons with various gender identities, self-perceived gender or sex identities, of gender fluidities. If you just unpack this, in the first statement, you mentioned something about biological reasons.
Right.
The next one, you are mentioning something about social and cultural reasons. Already there is a contradiction there.
Yeah.
But nowhere in your object, you are mentioning protection of rights,
Right.
which was the original intent of the Act. You are vaguely mentioning something called protection.
Right.
So what is protection? Protection means there is some danger. So what is the danger?
Yeah.
So we will get to that later.
Yes.
We definitely have to get to that
Yeah,
later.
sure. Yeah.
So, and then the intent behind using the words was and is, is that they are trying to say the 2019 Act was never meant to protect
Right.
all transgender persons. So this is to implement it retrospectively.
True.
So everything that has happened in the past 5-6 years, which is not a lot,
Yeah.
which is not a lot,
Of course it is.
right, is going to be nullified also. So the language is and was. So it is going to be nullified.
Yeah.
That is there. And also you are actually acknowledging that not to protect each and every class of persons with various gender identities, self-perceived sex gender identities, or gender fluidities, which means you are acknowledging that these people exist.
Right. True.
Right.
Yeah.
So you yourself know that these are not unreal people. These are real people who exist. But now you are just saying that the intention of the original Act and our intention is not to protect these people. These people exist, but we are not going to legally recognize them or protect them.
Right.
Isn't this the constitutional duty to protect every single citizen of this country, irrespective of race, class, sex, religion, all these things? Doesn't Article 14 right to equality guarantee us this?
Right.
So when you are deliberately saying that I'm going to leave out a section of the population which includes trans men, trans women who are not affiliated to the few limited socio-cultural identities that they mention. So what are we? What am I?
Right.
So where we are now being left on this legal limbo wherein we are no longer recognized citizens of this country.
Yeah.
So where will I go if something is going to happen to me? What are my rights? Do I not deserve a right? Or are you openly saying that these are third class citizens who do not deserve any rights? Right? So the original intent of the 2019 Act was protection of rights.
Right.
So now the whole framework and regime is being changed from a rights-based regime to a vague protection and protection-based regime, which already, needless to say, is an attack on the intent of the original Act. So this amendment bill is no longer
Yeah.
a bill which can claim to be a protection of rights
True.
bill. So I'm going to take the liberty here to say this is not the transgender persons bracket protection of rights amendment bill 2026. It looks more like the transgender persons criminalization
Right.
act 2026.
Right.
So this is entirely different from the 2019 act.
Right.
It is unconstitutional because you are already violating every single right that has been guaranteed to us by the holy grail of India, the
Yeah.
constitution,
Right.
right? So since I mentioned that it is not the protection of rights
Yeah.
bill, so already it's established now at least that there is nothing in the amendment bill that is talking about the protection of rights.
Right.
So it is not the protection of rights.
Right.
So then why do I say that it is the transgender persons criminalization act 2026? Here I would like to perhaps this is something that we have been thinking that the conversation should focus more on this particular point which I'm going to talk about criminalization, because you must be knowing that there is a pre-colonial era law there was called the Criminal Tribes Act 1871. Right? Part 2 of the Criminal Tribes Act 1871 was titled Eunuchs. Right? If you allow me, I'll read 2-3 points from the act. Um, it says, section 24, the local government shall cause the following registers to be made and kept up by such officer from time to time. It appoints in this behalf a register of the names and residences of all eunuchs residing in any town or place to which the local government specifically extends this part of this act, who are reasonably suspected of kidnapping or castrating children or of committing offences under section 377 of the Indian Penal Code. The same section 377 which was read down by the
Yes.
Supreme Court in 2018.
Right.
Or of abating the commission of any of the said offences. And section 25 says, any person demanding himself agreed by any entry made or proposed to be made in such register, either when the register is first made or subsequently, may complain to the said officer, who shall ensure such person's name or erase it or retain it as he sees fit. And 26, any eunuch so registered who appears dressed or ornamented like a woman in a public street or place, or in any other place, with the intention of being seen from a public street or place, or who dances or plays music, or takes part in any public exhibition in a public street or place, or for hire in a private house, may be arrested without warrant, and shall be punished with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 2 years, or with fine, or both. And 29, no eunuch so registered shall be capable of being or acting as guardian to any minor, of making a gift, of making a will, of adopting a son. So basically, eunuchs, which was a term which was used to refer to trans people at that time. So you had actually brought transgender people. This was pre-colonial law.
Right.
It brought trans people under the as criminal tribes, meaning anybody can register a complaint against you,
Right.
and the surveillance is very visible, because every person who is recognized as such and such has to have their names and details, everything recorded with the local body, the magistrate or whatever the body was.
Is this what the amendment also is now trying to do?
Subtly,
Because,
subtly, and
Right.
yeah.
Because that is the question I wanted to ask you, but you finish first and I'll get to the question.
Right.
Yeah.
So under this, so this was an arbitrary law, and
Right.
it's taking away every right from particular sex. So many of our tribal people were notified under this act. But post independence, since we gave ourselves the constitution in 1947,
Right.
so there is this doctrine in law called the doctrine of eclipse. Retrospectively, in 1952, the Criminal Tribes Act 1877 was repealed completely because it no longer fits into our constitution, because we have given
Right.
to our people, to every citizen of this country, every single right, under articles 14 through 21, so many such pre-colonial era laws have been struck down, right? So any reference to that, you cannot do it because it is unconstitutional.
Right.
So what the bill, the amendment bill, is subtly in a sleight of hand trying to do is through language, through jargon, through some kind of narrative fear, trying to bring back this pre-colonial Criminal Tribes Act 1877, which is perhaps the final fatal blow to our constitution.
True. Right.
Because if this is possible, this is going to affect all of us. Not just trans people.
Right.
And
so exactly the point that I want to ask you also, because you have been talking about self-determination. So, our society is still not ready to accept the difference between sex and gender. So there's one very important point that this amendment talks about is with regards to self-determination. If I may read, it clearly states that, it proposes that individuals must now undergo examination by district level medical board to establish that they are genuine transgendered persons. So how do you medically verify a gender? You can probably medically verify a sex of a person if there is, a male, female, or beyond that. But how do you verify gender? And when you say that, you need to get yourself examined for determining a gender, how real or practical it is. And the thing that you have been talking again and again about criminalization of the entire community, is this also something that directly points at it?
So like you mentioned, even the determination of somebody's sex when a child is born, so how does that happen? If you think about it, when a child is born, the family of the child first wants to know what the sex of the child is going to be. So you are just because the baby cannot consent, you are just going to look at the baby's genitals and say boy or
a girl. Right.
And we have a very sad history of female infanticide in our country, and probably in some villages it is still going on, right? So even this process is not scientific, it is what is perceived. So there are many intersex variations that you are not going to be able to see and determine, right? But we have this we have narrowed down the whole diversity of gender identities, or even sex for that matter, into the binary of two, male and female. And even intersex people, you are recognizing not as a rightful bodies, but you are pathologizing intersex persons' bodies. The intent and words are very clear. Like when you say that for no fault of their own or no choice of, when you say fault, you are saying that other people are faulty in some way. So it's already medicalization, it's already pathologization of bodies. It's already some kind of violence that is being committed on bodies. So even the recognition of sex is absurd at birth. But for the convenience of governance or whatever, you are doing it. But for gender identity, it's ridiculous that there is no test for gender identity. There cannot be a test for gender identity. And the problem is that the government wants to nullify any distinction that is there between sex and gender. So you want to convey your point that says sex equals gender. Sex equals gender. And what is sex? Sex is what is there in your birth certificate. And what is that? A doctor looks at your genitals, or your family looks at your genitals and mark M or F. That is your sex. That is going to be your gender. Birth to death, over. There is nothing else in between or beyond these things. So the conflation between sex and gender, I will tell you one clear example of where it is showing, because that is going to connect to the criminalization things that I'm talking about. Let us take BNS 2023, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, earlier IPC
Yeah.
2023. The okay, so if we can go back to the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita and see if there is any mention of transgender people in the BNS,
Yeah.
because this is the law that is going to guarantee law and order protection, right?
Right.
If I'm going to go to a police station and complain, first course is going to be what is legally guaranteed to this person, right?
Right.
So for every citizen of this country, the holy grail is now Bharati Nyaya Sanhita, right? So are transgender people even mentioned in BNS 2023? There's exactly one place where the word transgender is even used. That is to define transgender people. And what does that say? It directly refers you to, it says transgender person is whoever who is declared as a transgender person under the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights 2019
99.
Act,
Right.
section the subclause K of
Right.
section 2.
Right. Which will change if this amendment is
Yeah,
passed.
yeah. So it directly points to that.
Right.
So it is which is going to change, like you said,
Exactly.
if this amendment is passed.
Yeah.
Right. And there is exactly this one reference to transgender people in the Bharati Nyaya Sanhita.
Yeah.
Apart from that, you are not even talking about the protection of or any particular crimes or how you are going to deal with that in your law book, right?
Right.
So what does that say about the intent of the government to include, to be inclusive of extending equal rights and equal protection, as the
Yeah.
government wants to call it, to transgender people? And even in the BNS 2023, they explicitly say who is a man, who is a woman. Male equals man.
Yeah.
Biological female, that is our birth certificate, female
Says
equals
women.
woman.
Women. Right.
Nothing beyond this.
Right.
Right? So in the Bharati Nyaya Sanhita, a whole section of population who do not fit into the typical male equals man, female equals woman,
Right.
binary category are offered no protection.
Right.
You are left completely out of the legal, ambit, and now you are trying to further that stigma. Now you are trying to further that regime of non-protection, and you are calling it
Yeah.
protection.
Right.
So the understanding that the government has and the understanding that the government wants to push across the country is this binary idea that sex equals gender, male equals female, male equals man, female equals woman, and nothing beyond that. We are going to bring everything under this unified category.
Right.
We are not going to accept difference. We are not going to accept diversity.
Exactly.
And this is visible in the larger, attack on the gender minorities and other minorities and marginalized people on the basis of difference.
Yeah.
Because even though we proudly say that it's a land of unity and diversity, we are we are being pushed. A narrative is being pushed down our throat, wherein we are not ready to see difference for what it is.
Yeah.
And we want to bring all differences into one category, one nation, one culture, one development.
Yeah.
Like if this goes on, I will not be surprised if in recent future the government says one gender, one sex. There are no women also. No women, no reservation. Only there are only men. Other people have no rights in this country. I will not be surprised.
Right.
The voice for Goem.